Every love affair begins somewhere. Mine started in the mid 70s in a little small town in Indiana called Carmel. My dad and I and mom and sister lived there. It was a little tiny ranch house. We had a little tiny backyard, a little shoebox. Had a red fence in the back that was about 3 feet high. And every night after work, from the time I was a kid, father would come home. We'd go out in the backyard. I'd take my red wiffle ball bat, the kind that had like a narrow handle and a big fat barrel, and this big white wiffle ball. And he'd go in the backyard and he'd throw the ball and I'd hit it. And our neighbor used to sit on the other side of the fence and watch my dad run back and forth as I was hitting the ball over and he was running and getting it for coming back. And that started this love affair that I had with baseball. And it was this bond that my dad and I had that lasted throughout the weird, awkward teen years, that lasted when I went to college, that lasted now that I'm out in the world. He's in his 70s, I'm in my 40s. My baseball years are far behind me. But that game, baseball, is still the thing that bonds us. And what we think about when my dad and I get together and talk about stuff aren't necessarily the games that I played or the games that we watched or the times we listened to Marty Brenneman and Joe Nuxall calling Reds games on the radio when we worked in the backyard. We remember the atomic unit of the game, which was the catch that we used to play in the backyard. When I had dreams of being a pitcher, which was completely ridiculous, we would go in the backyard and we would play simulated games. And my dad would get down there. He was probably a little bit older than I am now, so I realized what it's like to get down in the catcher's position and catch 60 or 70 balls. Couldn't have been fun for him. He would call balls and strikes, and we would make up scenarios, and we would just play catch for hours. And in times when we couldn't talk about things that were happening in life, times when we could barely stand to be around each other because things were falling apart, either in our personal lives or our family or just the normal everyday living under the same roof with each other, we always had catch. And it was no different from the time when I was 3 in Carmel till today. And so I've thought about this for a really long time. And this idea for this book has been percolating in my head. And what I didn't want to do was tell another baseball story. There's so many great books that are out there. And it's too countless to even begin to name them. And I have bookshelves of nothing but books about baseball and the history and the people that made it up. What interests me about baseball now, and the thing that I think that's bonded me, and the thing that's been percolating in my head for about 15 years, is that atomic unit, the idea of catch. And so I conceived this project. It's a book, but it's not a book that I'm going to write. It's an oral history. And it's an oral history of fathers and sons and mothers and daughters about the time they played catch and the importance of catch and how that led to a love of baseball and what baseball has meant to them personally and in their family and what it is about it that has bonded this country for a really long time. Ken Burns did an amazing documentary called Baseball, which if you haven't seen, is an amazing look at how baseball runs through the fabric of America. And I'm not one of those people that believe that it will ever be replaced as the national pastime. That may or may not be true. But baseball is, to me, the benchmark of who we are as a people. And more importantly, the game itself, the patience that it takes, the length of time, the fact that there's no clock. You get to play until you make an out. You never run out of time in baseball. It is the most human and most American game, I think, that exists. And what is so fascinating about it is that the micro unit of it is just throwing a ball back and forth. And in that time, the bond that you develop and the friendships and the ways in which you learn to talk with each other, I think define and tell the stories about who we are. So Catch, an oral history of fathers and sons, mothers and daughters in baseball, is a project that I'm going to work on for the next year. I'm going to ask you to contribute stories. I'm not going to ask you to do it on your own. I'm going to set up times to interview people. I'll be asking folks who I should talk to. I don't really have a grand scheme of what I want it to end up looking like, other than I want it to be an oral history of catch and baseball and families and relationships. So if you're interested in participating, I hope you drop me an email. If you know somebody who you think would be great for this project, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope you follow along as we begin to build up these stories, and at the end of the year, release it as a book and see what happens from there. Thanks.